Hi everyone. Today I am going to launch into a video series. I don't know how frequently I'll do these videos, but this is kind of a new chapter or a new playlist that I'm going to be starting. Is talking about being an adoptee. What better time to talk about this and address this than now? My anniversary for coming to the U.S. is July 16th. So this will be the 33rd year that I've been in the U.S. And so it's just kind of I've kind of always seen it as like, I don't know, I've always called it an anniversary. Some adoptees call it Gotcha Day or Airport Day or a variety of other things, second birthday, but for me, I've just always kind of seen it and looked at it as like my anniversary. So my anniversary of my arrival to the U.S. This video, I'm going to talk about kind of the how I came to be, and how I came to the U.S. But I would like to touch upon topics, later on in future videos that talk about kind of my feelings about, adoption, what my experience was like. Those are obviously going to be a little bit more deep and, maybe a little more emotional, and then also like being able to talk about what it was like growing up as an adoptee, in addition to what it's now like being a parent, being adopted and being a parent and having my own biological children, and what that experience has been like. So those are all videos that I'd like to do at some point in the future, but today, I'm going to talk about basically my story. So according to the records that I have, I was born in what appears to be southern South Korea, in a town called Gwangju City. It's like the Mokpo province. It's down south in southern South Korea. So that's what some of the records indicate. Other records indicate that I was born in Seoul, but I think that everything traces more closely, makes more sense that I was actually born in southern South Korea. So I was born there. I started out, my records indicate that there's different stories. So I don't know the full truth and what is actually, what my existence was, but some of it says that I was abandoned on a doorstep. Other papers say that I was adopted, after 3 days. I was adopted from a midwife's home, down in Gwangju City, and I was 3 days old. Then at a later point in life, I moved up to Seoul. So I was adopted by a Korean family, so by a mother or by a woman, a wife and a husband. I was adopted by them. And shortly after I was adopted, they ended up getting a divorce. So my adoptive mother was not able to afford to keep me on her own. So then she ended up having to give me up to an orphanage. So that's kind of that's what I know of my story. Meanwhile, in the U.S., there was a family in Michigan at the time that, which came to be my family. It was my mom, my dad, and then they had 4 kids. So they had 2 girls, 2 boys. My mother had been pregnant with a 5th child, lost that baby. The baby would have been a girl. And so then they were like, okay, well, let's try to adopt. It had actually been something that my parents wanted to do when they first got married. It was right around the time of the Vietnam War, in the late 60s. And so when like the Operation Baby Drop stuff was happening, but they wanted to kind of start their own biological family first before adopting. So that's kind of where the idea got started, though, for them wanting to adopt an international baby. So yeah, so fast forward to the 80s, to 1982, 83. I was born in 82. And I'm not sure when they started the whole process of everything of my adoption. But I was born in March of 82, and then I was adopted to the States in July of 83. So, I was about 15 and a half months old when I came to the US. The thing with adoption at that time, and I'll get into this at a later video, but they were really, marketing us, marketing the babies. My parents got information that said oh, I can go and run errands for you, and I can do this and do that. And it was just kind of bizarre that but that's not what we want a baby for, So I don't know. It was things like that were a little bit strange. So I was 15 and a half months when I came. My journey getting here was I flew from Seoul to Tokyo to Honolulu, and then to LA. So I had an aunt and uncle that lived in Long Beach, LBC, at the time. And so this was, in the 80s. So this is back in the day when you could just go up to the gate and meet an airplane and everything. So that's what they did. My aunt and uncle actually went to the airport, went to LAX, met the babies and everything, because there was a whole bunch of babies on that flight, and they got to meet me. So they got to take pictures. They got to see me before my family in Michigan got to see me, which was kind of cool. And I actually have pictures of that moment. I actually do not have pictures of my family meeting me for the first time, but I do have the pictures of my aunt and uncle meeting me in LA. So from the LA, then I flew to Detroit because my family lived in Michigan at the time. And so the actual first memory that I have is I would have this memory as a kid, and a flashback kind of, and I would ask my mom and tell my mom about it. But I remember drinking apple juice out of a bottle, and I remember eating graham crackers. And I was sitting on my sister's lap, and I was in a car, and I was like, I don't know when this happened. She was like, that's the day that we brought you home from the airport. So that's my first memory, my first solid memory that I've actually had, because those were kind of details that it's not a family story that gets passed down and you then think that it's a memory of yours, but it's not. But that was truly I would ask my mom about it. I just had a memory, or did this ever happen? And then she's I had to think about it and was yeah. So for me, my earliest memory is when I was 15 and a half months old, which I guess you could say was a pretty monumental experience, traumatic experience, life-changing, everything. So it, of course, would probably be cemented within my memories. But anyway, so then I came into a family, like I said, there was 4 biological children, 2 sisters, 2 brothers, all of them older. There is a 14-year difference between the oldest, my oldest sister and I, and then 12 years between my next sister, 7 years between my brother, and then 5 years between my other brother. So the youngest was 5 when I came into the family. So there was obviously some family dynamics and issues that came to be and everything. But yeah, that's kind of how I was brought to the U.S., how I got here. So like I said, at the time we lived in Michigan. So I spent we moved to Indiana when I was 4.5 years old. So we moved the summer of 86. So I lived in Michigan for a while, but I did most of my growing up in Indiana. There were actually a lot of adoptees in Michigan. So we used to go to these different things and meet up with families and stuff like that. So I do remember that, a little bit. Indiana, definitely not as much. For some reason, Michigan was huge with adoptions, with Korean adoptions, and also Minnesota, I think, has the heaviest concentration of Korean adoptees. And I don't know why. Maybe that's where one of the, the home base of one of the adoption agencies are, which I think might be it. But I was adopted through Bethany here in the US, which was connected to Holt. So I was actually in the Holt orphanage in Seoul, and then they worked with Bethany Christian Services, who then facilitated the adoption here. So okay, sorry. Let's see what else. There are some adoptees who their parents, because I think now when you adopt, the child automatically becomes a U.S. citizen. I think. Don't quote me on that. But back then, you had to file, or you had to petition, you had to submit paperwork and stuff for your child, for the adopted child to like become a citizen. So I became naturalized, but I didn't become naturalized until 1987, and that happened when I was in Indiana. So I am naturalized. I had to get I have a made-up birth certificate, basically. I have a birth certificate that was issued to me by the state of Michigan. But it says, like, I don't know, it's kind of a weird thing. But so I'm, legit, legal, everything like that. But there are people that are older than me, younger than me, like their parents just never submitted the paperwork. And so they've had real issues as adults because they're not seen as citizens. And so they don't have the proper paperwork. And so they've had issues in like getting passports and benefits and different things like that. So I at least was able to get my naturalization and citizenship and stuff. So that's about it. So that's kind of the story of how I got to the US. So like I said, I always think about that in July. It's funny though, because I always think of my birth mother when this time of year comes around, but she doesn't even know, like she wouldn't even know that. Like it's more like I reflect more on my adoption and everything when this comes around, more so than on my birthday. Whereas my mom would know, like, oh, 34 years ago I gave birth to a baby. Like, I wonder what she's doing. But for me, it's more, I focus on that and focus on my mom, like, in July. I guess because that's, it's a significant date for me. So yeah. So, like I said, I don't want this video to become too long, and I just kind of wanted to put my introduction out there, because I've talked about being an adoptee, but I haven't really actually talked about it in a video. Like I said, I have many, many more topics that I would like to address, and those will come in future videos. So, hopefully you liked hearing and learning more a little bit about me. I am completely open when it comes to adoption and questions and stuff like that. So feel free to comment below if you have any questions. Share your story if you're an adoptee. If you know of adoptees, if you have adopted children, I'd love to hear your stories. Subscribe if you haven't, and I will definitely see you in my next video. Bye, guys.